What up, what up, what up, what up, yo? It's your host with the most, Angelo Sandone with Trash Talk Sports. No Mike and Mario today, but we have a very, very special guest all the way from over the pond in the jolly old London, the creator of Fantasy Footballers UK on Instagram, our friend Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing mint. How are you doing, man?
You're doing mint. That's what we wanted, those great British drops right off the bat, man. That's exactly what we were looking for. Dude, I'm doing great. It's been a little bit of it for the guys listening on the radio here. It's been really tough for me and Josh with the time difference to get together, and I'm finally happy we did. We were trying to do it on 4th of July for you guys because we want to show you guys that we're bonding together after World War II. to
Yeah.
really just like we're burying the hatchet and we're doing what we can to bring you the top fantasy results. So what we want to go over here today essentially is slot receivers. Me and Josh have been playing for a very, very long time, and we had a discussion one day about trends that people see, and one thing that people aren't talking about enough is the slot receiver position. We have superstars like Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill, Juju Smith-Schuster, who can go through and if they can get lined up against a linebacker or a small inside corner, they're going to totally disrupt that, and they're going to
exactly.
and they're going to take it to the house. So teams are finding ways now to move these superstar receivers and get them their targets and everything that they want inside of these new air raid type systems, and they're moving them inside, which is a huge fact that I think people are overlooking. But before we get into that, I think what everyone wants to know right off the bat is how does a guy from Manchester get into fantasy football?
So, what initially it kind of started off with just the love of the sport, really. So 2012, 2013 was the first kind of time that I was ever exposed to the sport, watching the Wembley games on TV and stuff like that. Stayed up one night, kind of just watching the highlight kind of show. I think it was the Steelers and the Vikings game at Wembley, and Adrian Peterson, I think, got like a 50-yard plus touchdown run or something like that, and ever since then I was kind of hooked, really. And I just kind of did every single possible thing that was related to the sport possible. So I was reading articles, watching highlight reels on YouTube, playing fantasy football, listening to things on the radio and all this kind of stuff. So basically,
Nice.
it was just kind of I was basically just obsessed with it, really.
Nice, and I think that's similar for everybody else. It's just interesting, Sundays for us in America is I'm with family, I'm with friends, we're out on the barbecue, we're smoking up ribs, we're drinking beer, we're having a great time. And we've always thought of Europe as being, that's how they are with football, the European version.
Yeah, soccer.
So, yeah, soccer. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to disrespect you.
No, so the way I differentiate it, so everyone here obviously calls it football, but if I refer to American football as football, when I'm talking to people that obviously are fond of the sport or know the sport. So the way that I always differentiate it is football is American football, so NFL, and then for soccer, I call it footy.
Okay.
So it's football and footy. So those are the two kind of that's how we
How
get
you
around
differ.
that
Oh, okay.
situation. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. The more you know, that's pretty cool. So you were saying you got into it in fantasy leagues and things like that. What kind of who influenced you? Who were the guys you listened to? What kind of sites did you first start playing on? Were you an ESPN guy? Were you a Yahoo guy?
So in terms of sites, NFL Fantasy was the main one that I used, just because I wasn't really exposed to any of the other platforms when we first started, because obviously in terms of promotion, over here you have Sky Sports and BBC. Those are the only two platforms that really cover the NFL. So they obviously want to promote the ones that they're partnered with, which is the NFL. So they always do like when they do the panel shows and stuff like that on Sky Sports before a game, they'll have NFLfantasy.com leagues with the people watching it at home. So we get involved using that kind of stuff. So I was always an NFL fantasy guy, but the last 2 years I've actually used Sleeper. I've used ESPN, NFL Fantasy. I haven't really used much of Yahoo actually, but I've heard some good things about it.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I hate Yahoo, and it all comes down to preference. They're for no particular reason. I'm just not a fan of their interface.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
agree with you with Sleeper. Sleeper has been huge, and that reminded me. You and I are actually in a league together.
We are indeed.
We are in the Empire League on Instagram. I know a lot of our followers are via Instagram, or at least initially from Instagram. So we actually have a league. We're in the middle of the draft now, as we speak. One of us could wind up on the clock. I think it would actually be you, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
I've got the second pick in the sixth round, so
Yeah, so you'll be
if
coming around the
if they
bend.
can go quickly, then I may end up being on the clock.
You guys listen. We are in a 20-person group chat. Okay,
It
and
blows up
it
so much.
I had to silence it 10 minutes into
Yeah.
starting the group chat. But when somebody wants you to pick, there's usually 10 other people behind it. And it's like, hey guys, this is a slow draft. Because I have to be honest, this is my first slow draft. I've actually never done a slow draft before. I don't know about you. Have you ever done one?
Yeah, I've done a couple, but that was mainly kind of with other pages. So I've done like mock draft, but slow ones, obviously because of the time difference.
Right.
But usually, kind of when everyone's awake, it'll be quite quick. And then, say I don't know, I end up falling asleep, and everyone obviously in America is still awake, so they just kind of wait until the morning or kind of lunchtime, my time, when everyone's awake over in the US. But no, in terms of what we're doing, I've never experienced something like that.
Yeah.
20 teams is a lot.
Shout out to all those guys. Definitely check out all their pages. There's way too many to list. But a special thank you to at Fantasy Fanatic on Instagram. He kind of set up the whole league here, and our good friend Josh, who is a genius when it comes to his photo edits and visuals, has actually taken over and started doing the initial artwork for that. How did you get into all that? Because I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen your page, it's really, really impressive the type of stuff you do.
Yeah, so my page at the Fantasy Footballer UK on Instagram. So my kind of passion really for graphics and stuff like that came from learning it at school and college and stuff like that. So I did media and photography as subjects, and I kind of just got the passion from there, and I've just kind of carried it on really and merged it into my other passions, which is obviously fantasy football. But yeah, the Empire League, we've got that the Instagram page, don't we?
Yeah, we
So
got that.
everyone that's listening, make sure you go and follow the Fantasy Football Empire. So all of the updates throughout the league, kind of as we go through the season and stuff, it'll all be on there.
Yeah, I've got
Obviously
most of
we've
my
got-
draft picks up already on there. If you want, you could also search the hashtag IG Empire League. Make it a little bit
Yeah.
simpler if you can't find it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of Instagram, Josh runs the largest Instagram page out of the UK for fantasy football on
Do
Instagram.
indeed.
Super impressive. It's only been up and running for a couple months. You have well over like 1,600 followers. Last I looked, who knows where you're at now. And if after this show, you might have like 3 more. But but you have a ton of followers. They love the artwork, and I think what they really come for is the insight. What was your thinking on using Instagram as your first platform?
So obviously with my graphics and stuff like that, I love having a visual to go with the analysis as well. I know from my own experience, kind of with researching fantasy football and stuff like that, going on NFLFantasy.com and all these different websites, finding out about players, having an overload of words and numbers and stuff like that can be almost overwhelming. And sometimes you just kind of you almost get distracted and just think, I can't be bothered with reading the rest of this. And
Yeah.
the bit that you might stop reading might be the most valuable part of the article. So what I try and do is obviously get the attention with the visual. So whether it be the player or whether it be a ranking or something like that, I want it to be aesthetically pleasing for the viewer. Obviously it's on Instagram. But then obviously in the description or the comments or anything like that, that's where the analysis will be.
Yep, yeah, that's actually a great little quote. I'm probably gonna have to rip that part out with the the one piece you don't read is the piece that's the most crucial, because you have to do the research when you're drafting in fantasy. If you really want to win, the information's out there to be found. When I started, because I'm much older than Josh, when I started, you were looking through magazines that would come out 2 months outdated, not updated, and you would, between that and ESPN is what you had. And if you weren't really putting in the work, research and buying different magazines, things like that, to gain those different perspectives, you weren't able to get ahead. Now you have no excuse. You have ESPN, Yahoo, Fantasy Pros, everybody.
If you make an excuse, then you're just being lazy, because there's so many sources, whether it's Instagram, whether it's through websites on the internet. Literally, there's no way you could possibly kind of not find information on any play you could possibly want.
Absolutely, absolutely. So speaking of looking for trends, as I was saying earlier, one of the most important trends that I'm starting to see is the slot receiver in the NFL. They gives the ability for the quarterback to have a quick check down. Thanks to PPR, that is monstrous for your fantasy team. When you're in these later rounds, if I'm between two guys who's maybe like a third outside receiver, or a guy that's maybe a third outside receiver, but they move him into the slot all the time, I'm going to take the guy that gets moved into the slot. They have the availability for the mismatches against smaller inside corners, linebackers, things like that. But now you're starting to see the superstars move into the slot position on occasion to throw off the defense, and it's proven huge. One thing for me that stands out, which is a nice segue here because he's my number 10 slot receiver, is a guy that's not a slot receiver. It's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is okay. He's the outside guy. We know what he does, right?
Yeah.
But last year from the slot as a Steeler, 33 receptions on 44 targets for 315 yards and 5 touchdowns. Most importantly, doesn't drop a single pass. This is huge. How do you get a guy like Antonio Brown, a monster ego, how do you get him more catches? You put him in the slot. It's that easy.
Put him somewhere where he's going to get more.
Yeah, absolutely. Put him where he's... Peyton Manning did it for years with no-name receivers.
Yeah.
Put the guys in the position that they can work the best. So, for number 10, I have Brown. Where are you at with your number 10 on your slot receiver list here?
So, my number 10 is Kiki QT. So, obviously, he's not the number one receiver like Antonio Brown is in his respective offense. But because he plays in the slot, he gets so much value from where you're getting him. So last year he played 60.7, so just round it to 61% of his snaps in the slot. So for a receiver, that's a really high percentage, especially a kind of second or third stringer. Everyone kind of has a debate: is it Will Fuller second or is it Kiki QT second? No one really knows because they get kind of a similar amount of share.
Yeah, well, Will Fuller's got the touchdowns. He's the clear touchdown guy. But this is what we're saying as far as value. There's no such thing as a sleeper anymore. That doesn't really exist. It's who's the value pick, and I think people are realizing that the term sleeper is a little dated. And you're picking QT probably 3-4 rounds at least after Will Fuller in most scenarios that I've been seeing. And yeah, Will Fuller might get you a touchdown every game that he plays, but QT's going to get over the slot, and if you're in a PPR league, that 3-4 catch difference might be enough.
Yeah, so, Kiki QT's getting average draft position, so his ADP this year is 6th pick of the 10th round. So you're thinking about kind of where he's getting drafted versus what kind of consistency you're going to get. As we said, in the slot, that is the check down kind of prime position, really. And last year, obviously, Deshaun Watson was sacked ridiculously. And if they haven't improved the offensive line, they're going to get those passes out really quickly again. And if Kiki QT can stay healthy, obviously he had some injury problems last year, if he can stay healthy for the full 16 games this year, I'm expecting him to get solid kind of low to mid wide receiver 2 numbers in a PPR league just because of all those checkdowns.
Absolutely. And I think the number 62 or 63. Now, the Texans actually did go out, so I'm going to piggyback off you here. My number 9 selection was actually QT.
Right, okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and piggyback off you here. Another thing that they did, they went out and spent early round picks on offensive line this year. They're not playing around that department. They know they have a deficit there. They know they need to turn it around. And the health, after the 10th round, it's a lottery ticket. If he gets hurt and you were banking on him being the guy, that's your own fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Who do you have coming in at number 9?
So number 9, I have Sterling Shepherd. So people listening might find that as kind of, wouldn't necessarily say a bold take, but kind of a surprise maybe. But you've got to kind of think that Sterling Shepherd obviously is now the number 1 receiver in his respective offense. Obviously Odell's now gone to the Browns. Sterling Shepherd is much more effective in the slot than he is out wide, which in an offense like that, you're not going to want to move him away from where he's good. You've got Golden Tate's now come in. Golden Tate throughout his career has been known as the slot guy.
Yep.
But in terms of production, Golden Tate can handle outside work. So Golden Tate will, in terms of what I'm predicting, Golden Tate's going to become that maybe, I wouldn't say primary outside guy. He'll probably swap between Shepherd and Golden Tate, but I think Shepherd will get more slot snaps than Golden Tate will, and I think based off where he's getting drafted in the 8th round, I think he is really good. So last year he was a top 30 wide receiver, and he was second fiddle to Odell. Didn't have any kind of flary games where I think he had maybe 1 or 2, but this year is his chance to really show up. You've got all them targets that Odell took now open for business. 50% of Sterling Shepherd's snaps were in the slot, and I think that's going to go up to maybe around 65. Similar to someone kind of like Kiki QT or Tyler Boyd, something like that. I think his role will be set very similar to a Tyler Boyd kind of role, where he's got that possession ability, but he's also got the speed to go downfield as well.
Yeah, so I hear you on that. He did have 3 games, well, 4 really. I would say I'll count the game he had with 17 points in PPR last year as a top tier game. I would be happy with that. He had 4 stud games last year. He did start all the games, but he was always kind of getting hampered by injuries and things like that. But he still wound up playing over 90% of the snaps in all the games. I like Shepherd. I think he is the number 1 receiver on that team. I agree 110%. I'm a little confused on what they're doing with all the slot receivers. But I think everybody's just confused with the Giants at this point. I mean, let's just be honest there. But anyway, coming up next on my list, I have Jarvis Landry, and so do you. It looks like. I like Jarvis. I'm nervous on Jarvis this year, even though he's on this list. But just looking at it from just an overall perspective here, I am a little nervous. Not that I think Odell is going to have this monster year. I'm taking the under on 10 touchdowns with Odell this year. But Landry had 150 targets last year.
Yeah, which people don't necessarily think of or even know unless they've obviously done their research.
But here's the problem. He didn't catch a lot of them.
Yeah, which for a slot receiver you're kind of expecting.
That's a pretty important thing, but he's done it in the past. He will have Baker Mayfield all year this year. He was also the guy that everybody was looking at. With Odell there, he'll be a little bit more open. I don't see his target rate going up, but surprisingly, I don't see his target rate dropping, let's say 30% or 35%. I still think that he's going to be a guy that's going to get around 120, 25 targets. I think that's still a capability, and with that many targets comes the chance. That's why I have him on the list. He's just a little bit further down. Who do you have coming up at 7 here?
So number 7, I've got Tyler Boyd. Personally, Tyler Boyd is one of my favourite receivers in terms of what you're getting. So you bang for your buck. Tyler Boyd's probably one of the best ones.
The Tyler Boyd from Team Trash Talk in the IG Empire League? That Tyler Boyd? I think I know who he is. I think I've heard of him.
Yeah. I think you do know him. in terms of what you're getting, Tyler Boyd is one of my favourite receivers. Last year he put up over 1,000 yards, and he plays better with AJ Green. His production's better when AJ Green's on the field, which out of the number two receiver, most of the time you don't really see. Most of the time, like with Antonio Brown, and Juju, similar kind of relationship. When they're both on the field, the second string wide receiver always produces. So
Yeah, because
I
they're
think
taking the
I
coverage
think
off.
yeah, exactly. And people kind of forget that AJ Green is still a top. I want to say top in terms of pure physicality and physical ability. I think AJ Green is a top five receiver in the league, but people just forget about that because of his injuries. And I don't know. AJ Green is obviously a value, but he doesn't play slot. Tyler Boyd's a value, and he plays slot.
Yep.
And he's gonna get. Don't forget, Andy Dalton is not an elite QB. He's not. I wouldn't even say he's a great QB. I did a podcast with TCK Pod. I don't know if you've checked them out on Instagram, but you really should.
Okay.
He's got he calls Andy Dalton Average Andy. That's his name for him. Basically just because he's never great and he's never really rubbish. He's just kind of he's that safe blanket.
Absolutely.
And
right. He's got a decent floor.
yeah, exactly. And I think with Tyler Boyd, that is a very similar kind of comparison almost. Tyler Boyd's explosiveness isn't as high as AJ Green's, but his floor isn't as low as AJ Green's. So
I agree with you 100%.
That's why I really like him.
I agree with you 100%. I have multiple board bets that Tyler Boyd will outperform AJ Green in fantasy. I like AJ Green. I've had AJ Green on teams prior. I got a few issues.
He probably killed you.
No, when I had him, it was a little bit earlier on in his career, in a particular dynasty league that I'm talking about. But now I have Tyler Boyd in there, and I couldn't be happier. And I agree, AJ Green is going to improve Tyler Boyd's numbers. Tyler Boyd was a number 17 overall wide receiver last year. He's getting drafted behind guys that he outperformed last year in only 14 games. So that's really big for me. I mean, you look at some of his games here, especially down towards the halfway point of the season and on. 28 points, 21 points, 15 points, beginning of the season, 21, 25, 25, 28, 6. I mean, he's putting up crazy points, and his lower end stuff, he's still getting you between, I would say, 12 and 15 points on the regular on those other weeks. He did have a few slump weeks, and that's going to happen, but AJ Green would kill you with that kind of stuff. And it wasn't even just getting hurt. I'm sure the injuries helped it, but he was very much Amari Cooper to me. Very volatile. He could score you 40 points one week and win your league for you. And then the next week he could score 3 and you're shit out of luck and he lost the game for you. Which is why I stay so far back on guys like that. I love Cooper this year, but I won't take him in a standard 12-person league outside of round 3. Or inside of round 3, I should say.
Yeah. No, I agree with you in terms of kind of the scariness of it. I just think if AJ Green can stay healthy, obviously it's a big if, but if he can stay healthy, then I think he'll finish as a top 6, top 7 wide receiver, because he's shown that if he can stay healthy for those 16 games, he produces every single time, but it's just staying healthy which is the problem. And Tyler Boyd's going to produce whether he's there or whether he's not, and he proved that last year, which is why I've got him at number 7.
Yeah, I see him if he does play all 16. I wouldn't disagree with you. I don't know if I'm going to go as high as 6. But I wouldn't disagree with you to say that he's a top 12, top 10 wide receiver at the end of the year. My issue with him is, like I said, it's going to be spotty. You're going to have, 4 monster games that win you that game, win you that week, which is what we're doing. But I don't.
He'll end up losing you a game probably next week. Right,
and very well could happen. But what I love about the Bengals this year, even for average Andy, Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor's coming in.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, he's bringing that offense with him from LA. I want anybody involved in LA. When I'm doing certain drafts, if you guys are at the back end of your league or the back end of your draft in your league, and you're not sure who to go with, and you have a person that could be, playing in L.A. Philadelphia is a team that spreads the ball around. You need a late tight end, Dallas Goedert. Talk about somebody
love
lining
Dallas
up.
Goedert.
Yeah,
Absolutely love him.
Actually, it's a shame. We should have did some slot tight ends.
Yeah, yeah.
Guys that line up outside and inside. But, Zach Taylor's going to come in. Tyler Boyd is going to play that Cooper Kupp role. And that's monstrous for him and A.J. Green. They're totally complementary. They're not going to get in each other's way. They very well, listen, if they become Juju and Antonio Brown of last year,
That's ridiculous.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
Would you be shocked? I wouldn't be that shocked.
The only reason I would be shocked is because of the volume that Antonio Brown and Juju got last year. Their production came from the volume, and Andy Dalton can't support that kind of volume. Personally, I don't think he can. And now they've got Joe Mixon. I think they're going to lean more on Joe Mixon this year than they did. Well, obviously they did last year, but obviously Zach Taylor coming in from the Rams coaching tree, he knows all about Gurley. He knows all about that kind of offensive scheme, and I've seen reports, and he said he wants to use Mixon like they did with Gurley. And if they did, then obviously Boyd and AJ Green will have that kind of role, like you said, with Cooks and Kupp and stuff like that. But I think the volume is what I'm worried about, because I don't think Andy Dalton can support that kind of volume. But I think they'll still get close to that kind of numbers just because of the offensive scheme.
Yeah, I don't know if they are going to be the Rams, but what I love about that is we all thought that the Rams were terrible under Jeff Fisher for years. We thought Goff was a bust. We thought Gurley was washed up. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, McVay comes in, and that turns the team around, does a complete 180. So I'm really excited about Boyd. He's actually my number 5, so we won't even have to get into it with that. Boyd is my number 5. Next up, on my personal list, I have Pettis after Landry coming in at number 7. Dante Pettis is a guy that I'm really excited to see. Obviously, he had a hot year last year. He showed a lot of great flashes. But just him coming out of the slot next year, they're another team, too, that I love because they'll draw your linebackers in. Because Shanahan loves using those running backs. You know what I mean? He loves using his running backs. It's going to open up plays for Pettis. I'm excited to see him with Garoppolo. I don't know. Are you a Garoppolo guy?
I am. I'm just curious to see what he can do in a full season. Just because obviously we haven't seen we've never seen a full season out of him before. We've only seen stretches. Obviously, so we saw that 5-game win streak at the end of one season, and then he came into the obviously the next season and then got injured last year. Yeah. So I think if he can learn from his mistakes in terms of how to be a good NFL QB in terms of, let's say, kind of obviously protecting himself, but also making the right decisions. So like you said with the check downs, it takes a lot of pressure off him. So if there's blitzes inside or outside, those check down routes are going to be perfect for him. And if Pettis plays that slot, then he's going to get so much volume. That's why Kittle was so good last year, because there was literally no receivers there. They were all injured.
And I think with Kittle this year, that's a great point, because I think with Kittle this year, they're going to be focused on Kittle. But there's some other options on the outsides there that people kind of forget about, and Goodwin and things like that. So Pettis can kind of play wherever he wants. He's the most efficient in the slot. He caught 12 passes for 16 targets, 234 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And on 16 attempts, 234 yards and 2 touchdowns is insane. That's awesome. And you can expect that once every 4 weeks from Amari Cooper. But Dante Pettis, now the one thing I do like too is I'm a big fan of, we were just talking about systems in LA. I'm a big fan of the system in San Francisco. I think it's a little underrated and kind of overlooked, because Beathard and
Nick Mullins.
Yeah, that's how important he is. Combined, number 11 quarterback overall last year in fantasy.
Yeah.
So the system works, and I think with a full year with Pettis, and now they kind of know what they have, I think him and Kittle could really expect to have a great year this year. Moving on, I have Cooper Kupp as well as you. Give us a little bit of insight on Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, so I have Cooper Cup a little bit lower than you. So you have him at 5, don't you? I have him at 6.
No, I have him at.
Um,
We both have him at 6. I
oh,
have
do
Boyd
you?
at
All right,
5.
okay.
Yep.
All right, okay. So I have Cooper Cup at 6. Obviously, last year, he got a really bad injury. Um, I've put him this high based on his talent, not necessarily based on what he might produce this year, because I don't know if he's going to be ready, or if he's ready for week one, he might not be fully fit for week one.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed. Yeah, we
so I
actually.
don't think, yeah, I don't
Do
think
you
we're going to
follow
get.
Fantasy Doctors?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
So we actually do. We've done a couple interviews with Dr. Nithin over
yeah,
there. He's a
he's
D,
great.
dude. He's fantastic. A big shout out to him. We were actually talking about guys with ACL and MCL tears coming back, like an 18-month window of what they really need. And I think you saw it last year with Carson Wentz, where
Yeah,
he wasn't as mobile. He couldn't move
yeah, he was
around.
still very wary of it.
Jalen Smith from the Dallas Cowboys at linebacker. His rookie year looked really slow. Comes out of sophomore year last year, and he's got the quickest side to side speed you ever
Yeah,
seen.
he was last year. Him and
Van Der Esch.
yeah, Van Der
Yep.
Esch. Those two were. I'm so excited to see them this year, and they've got such a good defense for the future if those two can stay healthy and stay in that team. Obviously,
Yeah.
then you've got kind of Zeke and Cooper and Dak on the offense. That could seriously be a powerhouse team for the next decade.
Don't listen. Don't get me fired up. I'm a big
Uh,
Cowboys fan. I live in Philadelphia. Don't even get me all fun.
Ooh.
Yeah, oh man, you listen. I've heard it
I'm
all.
a Philly fan. I'm a Philly fan, so.
Oh, good lord! All right, this interview's over. Wrap it up. But getting back to Cooper Cup, I think Cooper Cup is going to really help his team out. We were talking about the stat before we got on the air here a little bit, where when Cooper Cup was off the field, Jared Goff and Brandon Cooks really suffered drastically. Woods had a slight improvement because he was getting back into the slot. I think that this opens up the Rams offense a lot more. Cooper Cup, mistake me if I was wrong, but he was in the contention for top 3 wide receiver when he went out.
Yeah,
I
his
think he was number
production.
1 in some leagues. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
that was PPR or not.
yeah. I think that was in standard because Adam Thielen I think was number one
No,
when
that's who
Cooper
it was.
Cup
That was
went out.
Thielen. Yep, the other white guy.
Um,
Yeah.
but Cooper Cup in terms of his actual production was ridiculous. 16.9 points he averaged per game, which is more than Robert Woods did, more than Tyler Boyd, almost as much as Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen was actually on 17.3 average per game. So you've got to think about what kind of company he's in,
Hmm.
what receivers were around him in terms of what he was actually producing, and where he was getting drafted. Cooper Cup last year got drafted at the end of the 4th round. Um, so if he stayed healthy for the full season, he was probably a league winner. Based on the value that you got for him, he probably dropped into the 5th in quite a few rounds.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
We
yeah,
actually had him in a dynasty league. Mario, one of the other co-hosts of Trash Talk, Mario has loved him from the time he came out because he looked like Beasley coming out of college. And
yeah,
he's a massive Cowboys fan as well, so there's a little bit of homerism there. But yeah, Cup, I mean, the stats don't lie. 32 passes on 40 targets, 417 and 5 touchdowns in a small window. That took Antonio Brown, who's one of the greatest receivers of this decade, maybe further, but just, definitely this decade. It took him all 16, to
yeah,
get those kind of targets. If you double that, man, that's insane. That's well worth its value in the ADP, which is kind of the whole point of the conversation. A guy that we have coming up next is a top 12 receiver overall after week 4. He did not play weeks 1 through 4, and that is Julian Edelman. You have him at number 5. I have him
yeah.
at number 4. Uh,
Mhm.
I love Edelman. His points per game was the highest it's ever been last year. What I'm nervous with Edelman, and this is why he's not up a little bit further, because he is super consistent when he's on the field. He's the number
Yeah,
one. You can talk about Nakeem Harry all you want. You can talk about Brady being old. You can talk about they're a run-first team now, and I wouldn't disagree with you, but for fantasy purposes, this man is consistent. He gets his targets, and I don't think anybody else on that team, when they're playing, except for Tom Brady, can say that they're going to have the attention of the quarterback. Nobody
yeah.
knows New England's game plan except for Bill Belichick going into that
Mhm.
game. So I love him, but we're also only 1 year removed from an injury. in a
Yeah, of
year that
course.
he didn't play a whole season. So I don't want people to forget that Julian Edelman was banged up. Julian Edelman is injury prone. You know, it's hard to rank people with injuries in mind, but you have to add a little bit for it, and that's why I have him
Yeah.
down at 4. He's at 5 for you. Just go ahead and give us your thinking on that.
Yeah, so I have him at 5. I mean, obviously, like you said, with his injuries and stuff, he plays through them. He's quite a tough player. He's quite an old school player. He kind of just puts a wet sponge on it and then gets back on the field. But obviously, in terms of his injury, you have got to take that into consideration. I would have him as a top 3 slot receiver in fantasy football if it wasn't for those kind of smaller factors, just because the guys I've got above him don't have as many of those factors. But yeah, like you said, his fantasy points per game last year 17.3, which is the exact same as Keenan Allen, which is really really good. So if they played the full season, then they would have come around the wide receiver 12 mark. Obviously, he didn't play the full season, so he came out at wide receiver 20. But he still got over 100 targets in less than a full season, which, like you said, he's getting that attention from Tom Brady, which in a PPR league you want, because obviously you get points for those receptions. And his points per target, I don't know if you know this, he's got 1.92 points per target, which is higher than Juju, higher than Keenan Allen, almost at the level of Adam Thielen. But that's just because Adam Thielen got ridiculous amounts at the start of the season.
Insane.
It just stat padded, because after the halfway mark, it dropped off ridiculously. So Adam Thielen's total you can't really take it too seriously, just because he got overloaded too early at the start of the season. Whereas Edelman's you can trust because it was consistent, and having 1.92 fantasy points per target, if he's getting targeted 10, kind of 12 times a game, which now Gronk's gone, I'm gonna predict he's probably gonna get maybe even more than that. He'll probably get maybe
he's Jason
10
Witten.
to 15.
Yeah, he's the safety blanket. He's Jason Witten for Tom Brady. You know what I mean?
Just with a better hairdo.
Listen, I'll tell you what, he's not allowed around my girl, bro. I'm not having none of that. No, Edelman's a bad man. Actually, I haven't gotten a chance to watch it. Somebody was just telling me that his he put out a thing on Netflix or some streaming service about Edelman and his dad, and like their love for football and all this stuff. I haven't gotten to check it out, but I heard it was pretty spectacular. After that, I have somebody. We each have a player. This is what I found funny about our top 3. We each have a player the other person didn't have on their list. I was actually really surprised who you had. So, for me personally, I have it as Juju, Thielen, and Hill, and you have it as Juju, Keenan Allen, I'm sorry, and Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
Hit the people with the hard facts about Allen. I did not know this. I'm actually blown away by this, but fill me in. Let me hear it.
Yeah, so Keenan Allen, people really don't expect him to be a slot guy because he's the primary receiver. Usually the slot receiver is usually the second or third guy in that offense. Like with Tyler Boyd, he plays second fiddle. Sterling Shepard last year played second fiddle. Kiki QT, second or third. Edelman, even though he's kind of the favourite, he isn't an outside receiver. That's why you had Josh Gordon. That's why you had Brandon Cooks a few years ago. Gronk sometimes plays outside. Those are the kind of guys that would obviously push Edelman inside. And Keenan Allen is a very similar receiver. He's not a speedy guy. He's not a big guy. That's why he plays in the slot, because that's where he's effective. He's a really, really good route runner. So he actually played 45.8% of his snaps in the slot, which is higher than Edelman. Edelman only played 45.1%. So he played more. Even though you think Edelman is the slot guy, like when you think of slot receiver, you think of Julian Edelman. That's usually the guy you think of. Keenan Allen played in the slot more than Julian Edelman did. In terms of when he was on the field, that's where he played. And then you've also got to think of what points he got. So he was a top 12 receiver last year, and he played 45% of those snaps in the
Yeah,
slot.
I don't know how I
Um,
overlooked that. That blew my mind. I maybe what I was using just wasn't showing me that, which is great for fantasy. This is why we have these discussions, because you never
mhm.
know what you might have overlooked. What did you say earlier?
The one bit that you need to win is the one bit that you don't read.
Man, from God's ears, or from God's lips to your ears, my friend. That is beautiful. So we both have Thielen in there. I don't think really too much needs to be proven about Thielen. With games over 16 points, he has 8 right off the bat to start the year. He was the number one
Yeah.
receiver going into it, as you said earlier. Now, the points did drop a little bit, but he only had 2 what I would call bad games in week 15 and 17. Outside of that, he had 2 star-studded games over 15 points, and then he was at 12 and 13 points for the remaining weeks. I'm going to take that every day. I don't understand what people don't see the value here. If you're going to go with a no running back approach this
Yeah.
draft season, and you grab a guy like Julio, Hopkins, anywhere along those lines, and on the bounce back in the second round, you're able to grab Adam Thielen. That's money in the bank to me. And I know
Yeah,
Diggs could have a
absolutely.
big year. But Thielen's going to get his. Even if he comes through and gets me averages 15 points a week, which he blew out of the water last year. Even just 15 points a week, I'm going to take that consistency every time. This dude has a super high floor. I'm going to take that every time.
Yeah.
Another guy.
So
That,
he
go ahead.
just to add a kind of an extra stat in. So out of the games that Thielen played, he only got under 10 targets per game once, twice, three, four, five, 6 times. So out of those 16 games he played, 10 of those games were over 10 targets, which for a slot receiver, like we're saying, that volume is key. But then Adam Thielen also backs it up with all the yards and touchdowns. So he's an extra value on top of the slot receiver position, which he kind of came out of nowhere, really. I mean, he's not exactly a young receiver. He's 28 years old, and he's been in the league 6 years. Where has he been? He just blew up over the last 2 years. And I don't know, I think this year, maybe not out of the gates he won't be as hot, but I think at the end of the season he will end up with probably more points than he did last year.
Exactly, man. I couldn't agree more. So, the one name that you didn't have that I have is Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
So I get that we're dealing with a suspension. This is a guy that could only play 8 to 12 games. All reports look like it's 12 games now. I like to just say 8 to 12 just to be on the safe side there. He's getting drafted currently around the 4th round mark in a lot of leagues, sometimes deeper that I'm seeing in these mock drafts. But for a guy, you want to talk about slot production,
Yeah.
43 passes on 71 targets. Decent, not great, but 913 yards and 9 touchdowns out of the slot position.
Yeah.
He was a superstar. You have Patrick Mahomes. You have, and we don't care about the playoffs. We have a great regular season coach in Andy Reid coaching him up. Reid rarely has star receivers like that in his offense, and he really struck gold here. He's a guy that I'm going to target if I see his name in the 5th, 6th round, and potentially could have him for 12 games. That's a knockout.
Yeah, I would take that.
That's
The thing you've got to think about is the players you're going to pick before him will get you to the point of where he will return, and then after that, it's like he never left.
right. Or at least we hope so.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, he wasn't injured, so as long as he looked after himself throughout the off season, he should be in the same form as he was last year. So if he can come out of the gates like he did last year, then you're getting easily a top 2 receiver in terms of fantasy production on that offense, which at the value you're getting him, obviously, the first 4, 5 games, whatever it'll be, will be kind of, it'll hurt. But if you're picking, like you said, if you're picking Julio or Thielen up in the 1st and 2nd, and then getting your running backs in the 3rd and 4th, if you pick up Tyreek Hill in the 5th or 6th, I would be very surprised if you weren't the number 1 seed after those 5 or 6 weeks.
Or at least have a ton of trade bait moving in. I can tell you
exactly.
So, moving on to our consensus number 1 to wrap this all up here, we got Juju Smith-Schuster.
The man himself.
Last year, we had a guy in our league. He was a little bit of a newer player. But he's a good friend of the whole group and everything. So, and he was interested in football, so he wanted to get into it. He drafts Juju second round, and I'm like, okay. Even that day, I said it's a little early. You could have waited a couple rounds, but I actually think you just nailed that pick. And sure enough, he did. He actually wound up drafting Kittle as well.
Wow.
Maybe
we should be taking tips from him.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, sometimes dumb luck's as good as any. But you got a guy like Juju. You're coming in with some massive weeks, 30 points, over 30 points in multiple weeks, over 20 points in multiple weeks. Worst game he had was 7.3 points and 8 points. Pound for pound, this is a guy who's lighting the board up green as far as high production values. Give us a little bit of your intake on Juju.
So, when I have a look at receivers' stats and look at their projections and stuff, I always look at their offenses as well, not necessarily their talent, because you could have a really talented receiver in a really bad offense, and that's going to hinder their ceiling. And Juju's in the perfect offense for him. I personally don't think they're going to move him out of the slot just because his production in the slot was so good. When he moved out wide, his fantasy points were nowhere near as high as he was when he was in the slot.
63 passes on 92 targets, 814, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that 97-yard touchdown that he got, I think it was against Denver. I'm pretty sure it was. That was from the slot, or at least lined up inside. And that kind of explosiveness that he's got just kind of reinforces the fact that he can play in the slot and still be super, super effective. And that it's a really, really pass heavy team. So last year they were the number one pass ranked team with 66.6% of their of their plays being passes. So 2 out of 3 of their plays were passing plays. Now for a team that's lost their number one receiver in Antonio Brown, now to have Juju as their primary outlet. Last year, Big Ben, I think it was 675 pass attempts last year, which is monstrous. That's so many.
Well, people, and you know what drives me nuts? People act like there's going to be this major regression, and they're going to turn into a run-first team. Pittsburgh historically has thrown the ball more. People know that.
Yeah, that's why Antonio Brown was a top 3 wide receiver for the past 4 years.
Right. Well, that's
because
why
it's such a pass-heavy team.
Where do Brown's targets go? Maybe some of them just don't get recouped, and that's your regression. You know, but I still think Juju, with what he got with Antonio Brown there, that's why he's number one for me. The sky's kind of the limit. Yeah, Hill, I would say pound for pound out of the slot. Also with Thielen. But Hill and Thielen, really pound for pound, were probably the most productive out of there. But just as an overall baseline, who do I want on my team? I'm probably going to take Juju. The ADP probably tells me to take Juju there. You know, he's the guy you're going to have to reach for.
I mean,
by this point.
You've got to think of last year. He had over 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns as the second wide receiver in that offense. Well, in terms of depth chart at least, or in terms of reputation at least. And this year, I think it'll only increase. He's going to be the primary beneficiary of Antonio Brown going. Everyone in that organisation loves Juju. Everyone in that city loves Juju. They're just going to feed him the ball. He will be the new Antonio Brown, but without the ego issues. And because I always say, if you've got a nice guy off the field, you'll have a nice guy on the field, because the organisation will want to make him the poster boy and feed him. And Juju is that guy. So I don't see why he can't get even more this year. And a bold prediction, he could even be a number one overall at the end of the year, just because of the volume that he's going to get.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that people don't maybe realize is James Conner had cancer.
Yeah.
He was worn out at the end of last season, and I'm actually a Conner owner in another league. Conner's going to help open that game up, because he's going to be in there year-round. We know what Mike Tomlin does. In the Empire League, we had somebody draft Samuels already, and I'm like, it's the 5th round or 4th round.
Yeah, it's a bit early.
He's not. It's even if it was a committee, he's still going to get around 220 carries. That's still the guy. But that everything predicts that Juju's going to be the guy. It's all the signs are there. Watch, he'll be Sean Alexander and be a total bust. But
Yeah.
but all the signs are there for Juju Smith-Schuster. Guys, thank you so much for all your time today. It's been a long episode, way longer than we were just vibing there. Josh, we were having a good old time. A special shout out once again, if you do not follow Josh on Instagram, he is the Fantasy Footballer UK on IG. We are Trash Talk Fantasy Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and coming soon our website, trashtalksports.net. Josh, is there anything else you want to tell the people before we head out?
So obviously we're on Instagram at the Fantasy Footballer UK. We've also got a Facebook with the same handle, and Twitter at the FF UK. So any of those platforms, just get in touch with us, give us a like, a follow, all those kind of things, and get in touch with the FF UK Nation community.
Beautiful, beautiful, man. Well, best of luck with the page moving forward. Really respect
you, too, man.
Dude. Your analysis is top notch, and your attitude is fantastic. All right, guys, go follow Josh. Go follow us. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much for your time. Peace out.